just I guess a few days out, just your overview on how this pre-draft process has gone, and sitting at 7 and 14, how much you like that range.
Yeah, I mean, as to how far it's gone or how it has gone, it's better than last year. I mean, there was a combine, which was helpful. We've had a lot of guys through our facility, which is helpful. Different workout when we get to do it here as opposed to going to see players in their own gyms. We get to actually have our coaches running it. We get to go through the anthros of all the players, and just makes it more normal, which is good. With having 7 and 14, we've been lucky enough to get a lot of players through our facility, which I think isn't true for every team. So we're fortunate to have that. And I think our guys, front office, did a good job of getting some really high level workouts, some competitive ones for some players that are in our range. So that is helpful. And so in the way of comparing to at least last year, it's been better. As far as how it's shaping up, it seems to me that the league, more than ever, it's faster than ever. And I also think that decisions are made much closer to deadlines than they ever were. You see how fast, how many things happen the day of the trade deadline or the day of the draft or the first or second day of free agency. So when I'm talking to an agent or somebody else, they find it hard to believe that we haven't decided who we're taking yet with the draft 3 days out, but that's the honest truth. Or if we're making a trade or not, because a lot of real offers don't come in until right before. But that's a distinction as far as what's gone on the last 10 years. It's not new as far as last year to this year, but teams are waiting a lot longer, and decisions are being made much closer to deadlines. So kind of some differences.
Hi, Bob. Along those lines, last year presented so many challenges of even getting to meet some of the guys face to face the way you typically do it, right? I mean, was this process almost more normal in terms of getting that time, like you mentioned, and getting to go to their gyms, and did it start to feel like what you're used to?
Yeah,
in a lot of ways.
Yeah, much more. Last year, I was kind of an aberration for all of us. This resembled pretty close to a normal year. I mean, we had the combine, we interviewed players there. We had a ton of guys in. We went to see a couple of guys in Miami because it's the media knows what we're doing before we do. You guys are so good at your jobs. So we went to Miami and saw a couple of guys. And so, yeah, much more normal. Whereas last year we were going everywhere. Nobody came through the facility. So, like I said, I mean, I don't know if I answered Anthony's question sufficiently, but I like our picks. We have a lot of good voices in the room, and it's different though, having 2 lottery picks, but we're excited about it.
And Bob, just to follow up one more time, guys who you may have seen last year who were on your radar but didn't have a full season now had closer to, had a full season. And how valuable was that for scouts or for the evaluation process to maybe look at a guy in a greater volume of games and opportunities?
It's always better, Janie, to get more information. Last year, we did see some guys. Scouting this year wasn't that easy though either. I mean, scouting was still hard as far as getting to college games was still difficult. You all know that by just getting to our games. I mean, it all was harder. So it wasn't normal in that respect. I'd say that was the biggest challenge, scouting real games, not the combine, not the workouts, but going to college games, even going to foreign games, all much, much harder. But the previous year, I guess we got to see some games in 2020 until it abruptly ended. But I was hoping to obviously see conference tournaments and the NCAA tournament, and then it was all canceled. So it's I'm hoping next year's totally normal. I think we all are.
Bob, Wes Goldberg from Bay Area News Group. Is now the workout process and all that pretty much done? And what are the next, I guess, 3 days look like for you and the rest of the front office?
I think it's coming to a decision point, Wes. The workouts are done. We talked about having one more guy in tomorrow which didn't come to fruition. We always want more, but at some point it has to end and you make a decision. But we're up there meeting right now and going through medical information as far as any issues that might be there or apparent. And that's a big deal because you'll see guys either one, elevate themselves in the draft or drop based on the last few days before the draft. I've been in that position as an agent, represented players and thought they were in a good spot. And then 2 to 3 days before the draft, teams would call and say, we can't draft him because of X reason, his knee, or there's something that showed up. That actually happens pretty close to the draft. Or you're scrambling to say to an agent, I need to get an MRI of his left hip. We've got a concern there. So much money at stake, certainly guaranteed money. So it'll be medical processing. Analytics have never played a bigger role than they do now, I think in every sport, certainly in basketball. And they're a much bigger part of our draft than they ever were and probably will be in the future. It's going to continue in that direction. So everything's a little more sophisticated, but eventually you have to pin it down. And that comes down to processing everything we've seen and done and heard. I was on the phone with a college coach today, and at some point you want all this information, but at some point you just want to say, okay, that's enough. Now we got to decide and get some clarity of thought. So the next 3 days will be what the previous 30 have been, which is, do we want to draft? Do we want to draft 2 picks? What if you draft a young guy at 7? Do you want to draft a young guy at 14? What do we want our team to be? All the things you write about, we're trying to figure out. And there's no perfect answer to that. There's no perfect solution. So we try to do the best we can and with what's put in front of us, whether that's the best trade, whether that's the best, just take the picks. So that's what we're trying to figure out.
Bob, this is the first year where you were evaluating G League prospects, guys from the Ignite. How different is that process versus the college guys or the European guys, the international guys?
Different. We went down there, myself, Joe, Lacob, I think Dunleavy went with us. And obviously we had our G League team there. So we had our G League staff there. Ryan Atkinson, David Fatoki was down there. I think Kent Lacob was there as well. So we had a pretty, like a lot of teams, had a pretty good contingent, but we flew in to watch, thinking we might have a high pick. It's different, Monty, same way you watched it. I mean, it's not the same as college, but what does that mean? I mean, the line's maybe a little further back. Rules are more NBA rules, but games longer. I mean, that's where the analytics help. You try to compare apples to apples. So it's different. It's the same as the international game. How do you watch our USA team now? It's not the same game, but what do you draw from that? You and I might argue or disagree on whether stats are inflated or deflated. Whether international stats, because it's 40 minutes and because you can play different kind of defense, have more weight or have less weight. So some biases in there, some subjectivity, but this is the first year, I believe, where you're scouting the G League with lottery picks in it. I think that's going to be the norm. So in 3 or 4 years, I could give you a better answer as to how we weight it. But it's gonna be there, right? That's the way things are going. There'll be a few guys every year in it. The good news is, for us, we got to see 2 games in 3 days, which was nice, and decent seats. Not great. Nobody had great COVID seats, so it's helpful, but it's not the same as college. Different game.
How would you describe the potential urgency level to try to find veterans, maybe via trade? And then what have your conversations been like with Steve and Draymond over in Tokyo, but even Steph and Clay?
Yeah, Steve and Draymond, their time zone isn't great for this. But Steve, I got a text from Kerr like 3:20 in the morning, which is great. I don't have my phone near my bed, so I didn't get it till 6:30 or something like that. But Draymond and I spoke the other day. Ironically, he's less involved. One year he actually sat in on the draft, which you can't be more involved than that. And we would be fine if you want to sit in on this draft. He's doing something more important, trying to win a gold medal. Steph's in a little bit of a different time zone right now. Clay was here rehabbing, but I think he's down in LA. But Clay's always been the least engaged on these things. Doesn't mean we don't love him, and I'll listen to what he has to say. But yeah, I know there's a narrative that they're involved, and I'm not being defensive here. They've always kind of given me their thoughts. They continue to do so. As far as urgency, we want to win. So do they. So does Steve. But do you draft a player that makes you better in 1 year that might not be better in the second year? And these are the things we get paid to try to get right. There's short-term decisions that are good. There's short-term decisions that are short-term decisions that you regret. And fans and ourselves will blame us, which we would deserve if we get it wrong. So that's what we're trying to figure out. It's never easy. This stuff isn't easy. It isn't always clear. You'd like clarity. I do, last year I've said this before, Clay being injured made it hard to see what we were. And I really hope next year, and I think we all do, let's find out what we are, whatever that is, whatever it comes out looking like. Can a rookie help us quicker, later? Rookies traditionally don't help early. I don't care who they are. But you'd like to find guys that can play a little bit with what we're limited to do in free agency, which is minimums, maybe taxpayer mid-level. Maybe that's a chance to grab some vets. We've done that before, but that was a team that everybody wanted to come to. Will veteran players want to come now with Clay coming back? We'll see. So we have to balance all that stuff, but we hear it all, Anthony. The idea that we don't want it to happen soon in the front office, or Joe doesn't want it to happen soon, isn't accurate. We all want the same thing, but we have to kind of figure out how to go about doing that.
Along what you just mentioned about rookies helping you at some stage of a season, how much pride do you take in what everybody did to prepare James and Nico, and that they both learned through the process last year, getting time, to develop, but also time to get in there right in the fire pretty early on and show what they could do.
Yeah, last year was, let's just put the COVID stuff aside, which was more difficult for everybody, even for all of you. Separate from that, which I guess it's hard to actually separate. To me, and again, I believe, and I think you would agree, everybody, when you draft a player, ideally you put them in summer league. Whoever we draft, they're going to play in summer league, which is next week, I think, or the week after. That kind of matters. It's important to learn our system. And then they go to training camp, and that really matters as a young player. And then you start the season out and you actually have a preseason. Maybe you play 4 games. Sometimes you used to play more. And then you kind of see what you have. Well, the hard part about last year was none of that happened. I think James practiced 1 time before the regular season. And then we all saw his first game, and you're kind of like, wow, he can do this, he can do that, but how does it all fit with what we're trying to do? And that's the challenge of kind of skipping those steps. But overall, I would have loved to have seen him get to finish the last part, and even Nico did a great job down in Orlando or at the G League. So we're excited about player development. We haven't had to do it in a decently long time. I know Jordan Poole is a product of it, but it takes the course it takes. We drafted Harrison Barnes, however many years ago, and he was kind of ready to play. And even Festus Ezeli was older and ready to go. But I don't know, Janie. It's one thing that we all speculate on. We do it too. And there's no, I don't know, it's hard to figure, right? I don't know if I'm answering your question appropriately, but I do think that we have now a good foundation and hopefully some good lead time with those rookies, with the rookies we take. And rather than throwing somebody, even in this draft, kind of right into the fire, having a summer league, a training camp, and a preseason, it's really important. Maybe more than people realize. It's important to us. And our system is not pick and roll and everybody stand in the corner. We're probably the antithesis of that. So I've had players that are veterans. Even I was talking to Zaza Pachulia, and he said, it took me a long time to figure out how I was supposed to play. And he was a veteran. So I like our system. I think it's great, but it takes a little time to figure out. And we need these young guys to pick that up as soon as they can.
Hey, Bob, given you know that anything could happen, obviously, given that. But at this point, Woj has reported that maybe it's likely that you're going to use both 7 and 14. You're not going to trade them. Would you say that's the way it looks right now? You're going to use both picks?
As of what time is it? Is it 2 o'clock today? Yeah. But here's the problem with that answer. At 2:45, that can change, or 3:15. And before you jumped on, Tim, there's never been the league has never operated closer to the deadline than it does now, and things have never happened faster. Today I got some trade stuff that it's Monday, the draft's 3 days away, that had never been discussed, brand new. I can blame myself too. In the GM community, we've kind of squeezed all this action to the last 2 days, and maybe it's the concept of I'm not going to get a real offer unless it's close to the draft. But today, right now, yeah, we're drafting 7 and 14. Don't get mad if we don't in 3 days, because that means something changed. But right now, yeah, looks like we're going to draft.
Does it get so specific as someone says, if this player is there at 7, we will make the trade? Is it that specific right now? Or
yeah.
Is there one or two players that are more live at that spot where teams are mentioning?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. One for ourselves, and I guess you can gauge you guys do mock drafts. I mean, who's valued, who isn't, what other teams want. You never really know. Our job is to get our part right. But yeah, I had 3 conversations this morning, and I said, is this trade on the clock, or is this trade something you do now? So you almost preface all of it with that. A lot of times teams will say it depends on how the draft goes, which then pushes this decision for both teams all the way to the draft, right? Even into the draft. So when you make deals at the top, or any big deals, you want as much certainty as you can get. So that's why you do that. Now, look, there was a deal reported 30 minutes ago, but they didn't do that. Just made the deal. So that happens. We did the Monte Ellis Bogut deal a couple days before trade deadline. Sometimes you do it, but most of the time, you guys know this, it happens at the draft, which means it is predicated on who's there. At least in the NBA, you guys cover other sports. That's how it's been going, and even I think more pronounced.
How necessary do you think it is at 14 to get somebody that you can play right away? And how do you feel? How comfortable you feel you can find somebody at the late lottery that can play right away?
I think we like more than 14, depending on how the whole thing shakes out. And we think who we get there has a chance to play. I mean, you never really know how, even if you draft a 23-year-old, just because they're old doesn't mean they're going to be great or ready to play. Young players now, some of them are more physically mature. They can get in there too. You've seen a lot of young players come into the league and do well. I think the challenge for us is, Anthony, I was, talking to Steph, and it's almost like, I don't care who we draft. Is that guy going to take minutes from Steph? No. So he's got his 35 minutes. You take minutes from Clay when he's back? No, probably not. When Clay's back playing his minutes, Draymond, probably not. Wiggins, probably not going to be better than him. Then you got Juan, who's playing well. Jordan, James is going to play. Other guys. So we'd liked this draft pick, whether it's 7 or 14, to come in and play. And if they I don't know that they beat those guys out, but we'd like them to provide depth. I think realistically, having them as beating out our top 4, 5, 6 guys is going to be a challenge no matter who we take. Even if we were drafting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think that's a challenge for even those guys. But we would like, Anthony, whoever we take, to be supplemental and to be playable. We would like that. We would, if there's a player that stands out. But if there's a player that we think can be better, and you say, you know what, we could go short term and take this guy, and maybe he gives us 8 minutes a game. But if we do this guy, yeah, he may not give us those 8 minutes, but next year he could start, or he could give us 20 minutes. And some would say, well, that's your window. Well, I don't know that our window is just 1 year. I would like to think it's not. All our major players are probably going to be playing and being paid for more than 1 year. I know they're getting older. They know they're getting older, but I think they're all going to be productive next year and the year after that. I think it does those guys a disservice to say you've got a 1 year window. So that's kind of how we view it. And again, not knowing exactly how whatever player we draft will fit in or what rotations Steve would like to use him with. So that's what we're trying to sort through.
Bob, speaking of that, how does Jordan Poole factor in? I'm sure you watched him at the Jamal Crawford pro.
I didn't. No, I saw it. No, I'm not kidding. But I heard he was really good. Was that a real? Was that even a fake game, or was that real?
The highlights were good, but I imagine it kind of blew up your draft board, right? You sort of
changed everything.
People off. And,
yeah.
No, seriously, I'm curious. How does what you already have in Jordan impact who you might take? There are some guys who might be similar. Are you okay with taking a guy similar, or like what's the Jordan Poole impact?
I think it's a good question. I think it's I mean, it matters, but even if you get another player exactly like him, I mean, that's and he turns out to be really good, then you can use those guys. Yeah, and I don't think any player is exactly alike. If you draft a player that some would say is like him, I think that's fine. I think what you more look at, Marcus, is can this player play? I mean, again, how complementary are they or not? You know, if they're exactly the same, yeah, exactly the same. But I don't know that anybody in this draft is exactly the same as Jordan or different. But more importantly than the draft, how we would view a guy like Jordan who did finish well is we look at him as part of our rotation. So that's helpful to have some clarity. We went into last season with, I don't think, much clarity on anything. So I think we've got more clarity, whether it's you can play Juan, you can play, you know, Jordan, and these guys have established themselves. And then you say, well, what does a second unit look like? Or until Clay comes back, who should we start? If we draft this guy, would you actually start him? Or would you start Jordan? And so it's more in the context of knowing more of who Jordan is than what we thought he was going into last season. And that's helpful. It's really helpful to say, well, we think he can at least give us this, and he might even give us that. And that's what you gained from last season, even though we didn't make the playoffs. For me and our front office, the chance to evaluate our team in some meaningful games. I mean, that's what Steve would say. He's probably said to you is the last 20 games were meaningful games, fighting for the playoffs. You watched them, they mattered. And we got to find out some stuff about who was who. And that's where seeing Jordan grow is helpful. And I don't think it would affect kind of somebody that we drafted was like him.
You think it'll be tough to find a player better than Jordan is now? Do you put him in that list with the I mean, obviously he's not with Steph and Draymond, but do you feel like one of these players can come on and be better than what you expect from Jordan Poole?
I mean, look, it's all subjective, Marcus. I'm happy that he, you know, you're drafting 7 and 14, and we like Jordan enough to have to pause at that kind of question and go like, you know, he's not going to beat out Jordan. I'm hoping whoever we take works as hard as Jordan, because he's a good story of a guy that really didn't do much. Actually was pretty criticized and not thought much of to kind of turn it around. And I credit Jordan and our coaching staff. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. He finished pretty well. If somebody does, then that's a good problem. If somebody comes in and beats him out, that means that person's pretty good.
Bob, you mentioned getting some trade calls even today. I mean, what sort of return would it take to move off of 7 or both 7 and 14? Well,
you know, it's hard because it has to really matter, I think, to me. It has to be those. I hope we're not drafting 7 again. You never know. Hope we're not drafting 14. So you have to value the opportunity, but then what we're trying to figure out is who's going to be there. You know, and I think we look at it like anybody would. Those picks have value to us. Now they have to find a partner in these things, and that's the challenge, right? You got to see what's available to you. But we like those picks. I think the league likes those picks. So to me, it would have to be something material. I don't think obviously you don't move them for something marginal.
Well, how much factor is age? I mean, you know, these days it seems like the 18 and 19-year-olds are highly valued, much more so than the 21, 22-year-old guys. How much of a factor is age for you guys?
It's a factor, Monty. We did, and we could draft a 22-year-old, we could draft a 23-year-old. So I preface what I'm about to say with that, and not have a problem doing it. It's not so much age being a negative as if you look at 2015 on, and the players that were taken in the lottery that were older struggled a little bit, right? It's just that's where the evidence is. That doesn't mean that these players in this draft will. So it's not so much old is bad, but the evidence would support maybe going younger sometimes. And that's what you have to cipher out. You have to say, well, is this an exception to the rule? Because if you look at the rule, it's, you know, players 22 years or older or 23, whatever your line of demarcation is, go back and do it yourself. That's information, right? You can say whatever, this guy's unique, so we don't care what that says. And there are good players that have been that age and drafted in the lottery. So I think it's more of our job is to look at that information and then decide if we want to value it, just like analytics. You look at these things and we rank guys analytically, and you might, if you were me, say, yeah, that guy's ranked 6th analytically, but I don't see it. And then somebody would press you on that, say, why not? Or somebody might say, I like a 22-year-old, I like a 23-year-old. Well, let me tell you what the history of those guys are. And then I hear all that and I say, you know what, this guy's different. So that's more of what it is rather than a number. It's our job, and this is why it's going to be more and more sophisticated in the future than it even is now. It's just information, and you just got to decide how you want to value it.
Do you think there might be any opportunity to move up in the draft?
I think it's going to be tough based on conversations. I think it's going to be hard. I don't say that specific to the Warriors. I just think that's probably the league. I think it's going to be tough. I mean, you just saw a team move up to 10, purportedly, but you know, you may be talking about up from us, which is, I think, a different challenge. Those teams are wanting young players, wanting young stars, and rightly so. I guess, Anthony, right now they seem to be hanging on pretty tight, but we'll see what happens.
Bob, have you had any talks with Wiseman, if for nothing else, to give him a heads up about this process and what he might be hearing?
I haven't directly said anything to him. Is that something I should? He's here every day. Should I grab him? Say, welcome to the NBA. You're going to be welcome to. I said Clay went through the same thing. Clay got traded 75 times when he was 3rd year in the league. Or I don't know. It's hard because I haven't, but not for any reason. I don't know players' minds because I'm not one. I guess, you know, it's a rare player these days that is not mentioned in a trade. If the roster of 15 and you're a rotation guy or a starter, unless you're somebody that's kind of untradeable, whichever those guys are, there's not many. Most players fall into the tradable category. So it's and the way the media is now, and again, this isn't any criticism at all, but there's a ton of sources and heard this league source that puts a lot of players in trades. And you know what? A lot of it's true, but a lot of it isn't. So I think it's hard to kind of respond to all that, Marcus, and kind of, you know, hey, I saw this tweet. That's actually not true. That one, I don't know. You can't do it. It's kind of a no-win situation.
I would totally need you to say something to me, by the way.
Really?
Yeah, I'd be all over. I'd be reading everything. I'd be falling apart. Yeah. Yeah.
No, if we sign you one day, I'll remember that. We do need vets. We do need vets and a local kid too.
Yeah, just sign Monty Poole to help me out. That's all I need.
You two guys, there's vets. We might need you.
All right. Do we have one last question for Bob?
Sure, Bob. If nobody else, if I'm not cutting off anybody else, Steve kind of valued rest down the stretch of the season. You know, not practicing every day necessarily. Given now, I know the COVID protocols made things even a longer routine every single day, but rest was valued. And it seems like as NFL training camps start, there are fewer two-a-days, and baseball players are no longer taking 300 swings every day. Is it a sort of a change in thinking in terms of volume these days in professional sports and what's necessary, and more of a focus on recovery and rest?
Yes, but I don't know that we've figured out what's right. We pull back from the shoot arounds every day, and it sounds like, other sports have too, or football teams don't hit as much. Or I think that's a question that may never be answered, because you have to get better, you have to play and practice hard, not half speed. But what's the tipping point where you're risking injury, or what are the diminishing returns? But that's why they all wear devices now, right? That's why they've got something in Clay's shoe where it measures the weight in each step. That's new stuff, right? So you're favoring your leg or not. Me running a mile, actually, I'd probably be more tired than you running a mile right now. So maybe they say, oh, Bob's heart rate's way up, get him out. Janie's fine, she can keep going. And that we do. Fair question. I think we still need to figure out ways as a league to make the regular season matter. And I think that's where the play-in game, obviously we got the bad end of that one. We lost, and so what? I think the play-in game's fine. But it makes it more competitive and entertaining, and that's a way to make the regular season. So I think things like that are good, and they make you want to value that stuff more.
Great.
Thank
One
you.
more.
Sure, Monty, last one.
There seems to be sort of an increasing amount of doubt regarding Kelly's return, and some of it's based on what he's saying to people. Where do you guys stand in terms of clarifying your future with Kelly?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to his agent who I've spoken with before, and he was good. And the question is, does it work for us? Does it work for him? And we haven't really dug into that as much. Monty, we're waiting for the right time. Right now, we're focused on the draft. Can't do anything now, even if we wanted to, really. So it's about seeing if it's a fit, and we haven't ruled that out. I haven't read everything he said. Hopefully, he hasn't ruled it out completely. But I don't begrudge any player for wanting to play, wanting to start. Never had a problem with that. I actually think that's a positive. So at some point when the time is right, we'll sit down or I'll speak to his agent and say, this is what we can do economically. This is how we view it. Post-draft, we'll see what we do in the draft and hear what he has to say and see if it works for both of us. And we'll go from there. But right now, for me, it's too early to say it one way or the other. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate that.